Day 1 of the August 97 10-day retreat in Springwater. There are many new people here. New meaning here for the first time. And there are many old people here, old meaning having been here many times. And we'll start with a talk which has been given many times, and yet will be new. Old and new at the same time. We'll talk about a new kind of listening. And not just talk about it, that's a manner of speaking. In these talks, we never just talk about something. This is what cages us in. Talking about listening means listening this moment to the words, the cicadas. Can you hear them? Maybe you're hard of hearing. It doesn't mean just listening with the ears. It means a new kind of openness and spaciousness in presence with what is there. Some people can't see too well, other people can't hear too well. Many of us, over many years of escape from pain, have numbed, so we can't feel very well. And yet, no matter what our handicaps may be, there can be a fresh listening, a fresh attending, which, even though the senses are operating, better for some, worse for others, are not the main source of attending. So can there be a new attending, awareing, listening? To what's actually here, palpably here, this moment. The bug fluttering at the screen door, the movement of wings, sound of birds or crickets, the breathing, can we hear it, feel it, touch it, see it inwardly as it were? A deep breath, or a shallow breath, or regular. Very often, if we try to define it, it gets interfered with, and then we don't know how to breathe anymore. But it happens. Anyways, whether we give attention to it or not, there's breathing. And attending is never about something, it's breathing. Breathing and attending are the same thing. There's no separation between breathing or chirping or heart beating, sweating or cooling, and attending. It's all one total happening. Right here. Not the way it was yesterday when I was so attentive, but now, this moment of indescribable presence. Sound of hum of a motor. The words that arise in the mind. Is it a motor? Is it an airplane? Is it a mower? Words arise and can be heard, seen, felt, like the breath, like the crickets, cicadas. And yet the immediacy of humming or breathing is not a word. Even though we're talking about it, but we're not just talking about it, there's also breathing and listening. Isn't there? The about it, the words about it, thoughts and concepts around it are sort of extra to what's actually taking place this instant. And what is taking place this instant is taking place before it can be described. The description seems to limp behind a bit. Of course, the compulsion to describe is enormous for each human being, particularly if we've been trained in the West, but the East is probably not much different. Describing, explaining, rationalizing. And we're saying that always comes a split instant later. The sound of trees in the breeze, movement of leaves. The sound is there first, and then the words come to describe it. Can you hear it? Hear it wordlessly? Because all kinds of phenomena may take place in the head, facilitated by the brain, maybe pictures about shivering, moving leaves, green and silver changing front side and downside. All of this can be imagined, imaged from the past, impressions. Words, poetic words may flow about the leaves in the breeze. And can the words and images that form in this brain, with no intention it happens, you can say either automatically or spontaneously. It's the same thing. That happens with no one doing it. And can become as transparent as the sound itself. It is so right now. Maybe not for everyone right this instant. Because people tell me and insist that they think first before they can hear something. They think first breathing, or think first cicada chirping, and then hear it. That may or may not be so. It may be an illusion. Of course, one may have been so absorbed in thoughts about oneself. That's the absorbing variety of thoughts about oneself. There was no perception of breathing or sounding of leaves and insects and birds. So absorbed that the doors were closed. And then somebody says something about attention, attend to the breathing, and then thought says, well, I ought to attend, and then maybe there is a perception, a direct, immediate perception. So it's not so important what the sequence is. What's important is that in the entanglement in thoughts and concepts about ourselves and this world, there are moments in which the net opens up and reveals what's really taking place wordlessly, even though quickly accompanied by words again, which do not necessarily have to disturb the attention. They can be included in the attention. And that happens when the thoughts are not focused about me as the central player in this whole universe. I can hear, I can't hear. Others are hearing better than me. I have to strive, I have to drive. All these self-centered modes of thinking support and sustain and constantly create the network of thoughts, me involvement, because these thoughts are not just ephemeral occurrences in the brain, but they connect powerfully with its entire organism. The heart, the lungs, the organs, the muscles, the feet, the hands. And certain centers, particularly, people will say, I still have this fear, and just grab their solar plexus or their intestines or both. Or I get so angry, holding one's head, which seems to expand and swell and get so hot when anger arises. So never just to hear somebody say it's just thoughts, or to think it's just thoughts. No, it's the whole being involved in self-centered, self-threatening, or self-enhancing ways of thinking. Which is what we have learned and what takes place all around us. It's in the air, not just in organisms, it's palpable. Vibrations emanating from an anxious or angry person, a repressed person, or a loving or joyous person are palpable and can have an effect on others, so-called others. In essence, we're all the same. We all spring out of the same pool, huge pool, an ocean of sameness, our inheritance and evolvement, evolution. Life on Earth, in the planetary system, in the galaxy, in the universe. One essence of sameness, which is stillness and empty space, in which things dance around like dust in the dark when a light falls on it. So, how can this new listening, this new attending, awareing come about? That question may arise in many of us when we hear about it. I want that. I don't want to remain all involved in self-enclosing, self-centered thinking. And mind you, right from the outset, let me say, when I talk about self-centered thought, I'm not saying it reprimandingly, judgmentally, implying that it should change, it shouldn't be like this, it's bad, the opposite is good, unself-centered thinking. It's not what is meant to happen, and yet it's received like this because we are used to hear ourselves being chided, reprimanded, judged. And it's been so ingrained, so introjected in our system that we now blame ourselves where others were the first ones to blame us. We have taken it all in. It's all tape recorded. We all boast tremendous libraries of tape about ourselves, what we should do, what we should not do, what's good and bad. So, when I talk about self-centered thinking, it's put out here factually to see it in oneself as it crops up almost every moment of thinking. Almost every moment of thinking, unless there's great awareness and attention, is self-centered. Is that so? Don't buy it. I'm not selling anything. I'm just offering up for mutual investigation, exploration. Like leaving no stone unturned in what comes up in oneself. Not just looking to the outside for blame, for fault, for why this happened, but wondering, why do I get upset? Why do I get anxious? Why do I get angry, desirous? We'll talk about this question why later. I have to come back to what I started. Namely the question, how can there be this new listening? Which makes so much sense to listen freely, factually, directly, immediately, and be aware of what is thinking about it and what is immediacy. And allow thoughts that do come up to be perceived immediately, freely, loosely, spaciously. I don't know how it's possible. I have no directive or method, technique to get there. It just happens for human beings, ordinary human beings, like you and me. Openings do happen, whether one is engaged in spiritual, traditional or untraditional training or not. Somebody here recently told me in a retreat, a person who comes to retreat, he and his wife and their young, just starting to be teenage daughter were taking a stroll through a woods. And the daughter, being the way she is, didn't want to walk with the parents. She wanted to find her own path. And they let her. They were in a good mood. And then suddenly they missed her. She was lost as far as they were concerned. So getting quite anxious and calling, looking, running, whatever. And finally came to an opening in that forest, and there the daughter was standing, leaning against a tree, just totally absorbed in looking. Maybe absorption is not the right word for this, because what she later wrote down about it was not absorption, it was an opening experience, seeing the wonder of the trees and the opening and the light and grass blades, and herself in the midst of this as nothing separate. And she'd never done anything except knowing that her parents were going to some weird place every once in a while. The man was really laughing when he was telling about it. He said, I've been laboring for years. And she just walks a separate path in the woods. And realizes the truth of our being, the truth being no separation, no division, wholeness, presence, and the beauty of it. Not always beauty. It could be very painful, because pain happens. Body is not always healthy, and all kinds of thoughts crop up which trigger tension, stress, anxiety, worry, desire, whatever. You watch it. It's all there to be watched. So not to cultivate this idea that I must get someplace spiritual before I can be aware. Such notions, often so firmly ingrained in the mind, prevent the simplicity of being here. In a naive, childlike way, like the daughter got lost or didn't get lost on a trail. Suddenly touched by truth. So not to, and to unearth these notions, or rather let them let them come to light and question them, question notions that I'm not ready yet. Somebody wrote me this again in a letter I answered yesterday. I'm probably not ready to, because I haven't had the courage to come and drive to Springwater. I'm probably not ready to meet you yet. Such very burdensome ideas. Get in the car if you have money to put gas in, turn on the ignition and drive up. And we'll meet, if of course there's such a thing as appointments, but they are always available. And we'll meet. And as I said yesterday, you don't have to work up special spiritual energies to come into that room and talk or not talk. Allow this moment to unfold on its own, without anticipation of marvelous or horrendous things to happen. And if those notions are in the mind, they affect our perception. We think marvelous things are happening, we project them and then we see them, like a movie projected onto a screen. But we don't see the simple screen. The simple light that shines through all the movies. So, allow in this tremendous 10-day opportunity to be quiet, still, maybe not always relaxed, to have the stuff that holds us, that distorts our perceptions, that prejudices us, allow it to surface and to be seen, to be just lit up with attention. Not what do I do about all these things that come up? There's no doer in this, there's just attention. And also attention of the desire to run away from this I don't want to face. Maybe for a moment, but then, no, this is not, for me it's too dangerous to touch anxiety or fear. And these are not conscious decisions. These are habitual reflexes. Maybe verbalized, maybe not quite verbalized. No, away, not that. Get rid of it. Come to something else. Think of something else. To see this whole theater going on in and around uncomfortable situations. And maybe it dawns that it's all right to sit quietly with an uncomfortable situation in a bright room with windows and doors open, the sound of leaves quivering in the wind, and the breathing and the motor humming, and what is no longer called an uncomfortable situation, but allowed to be there in its full potential. Not coaxed, not cultivated, just allowed to be there with resistance lifting. Because resistance reveals itself in quiet sitting. This, I don't want to, I have to get away. Not that. That's all resistance. Based on unfounded assumptions, false assumptions most of the time, that I can't bear it. And to approach this in a fresh spirit of exploring, what is this? Fear, anxiety, discomfort. Carried it around with me all my life. Escaped from it most of the time. Hardened or numbed myself. Not intentionally. The body takes care of all of these processes. It has an amazing repertoire of protective responses. One person told me this. Either I blank out, and I have a suspicion I've used meditation to sort of keep anxiety at bay, cap it sort of. Learning at first concentrative methods. And of course, as this person said, if one counts numbers, one doesn't need to feel fear. One just counts numbers. The more the fear, the intense the counting. But it was noticed, came into awareness that this was going on, and the question, does it have to go on, or is it possible to be with this thing completely unprotected? And the first thing that was noticed there, at least it was brought up in the meeting, was I've grown numb. I don't even feel it if I want to feel it. But what is numbness? Not to use a word and then have the thing settled and explained. There's all these amazingly clever shenanigans of thought to get away from direct meeting, direct facing, without knowing. So, of course, why did one say one is afraid, one feels fear, and then says one is numb? There must be both going on. So to let it all reveal itself as it happens, and not hide behind the words, labels, descriptions, but be in touch. Which does not kill us, it only kills the whole protective system that has built up over years and numbed and insulated and isolated us from the living truth of being. Being in a vulnerable body, in a vulnerable world, a vulnerable universe, full of energy, full of change. Nothing staying, nothing persisting. The most obstinate of all the factors in this universe is thought. It can persist. But it needn't. It has that quality of persistence, stubbornness. But once questioned, it may yield. Yield to what? To being seen as a thought with great power over the organism and our relationship with each other. Somebody recently came to a retreat and said, I'm missing something in your talks. I haven't been here for quite a while and I'm coming back. I'm still missing something. You always talk about the organism. You never talk about the heart. Organism sounds so cold, so scientific. So, it's true. I don't use the word heart too much, although if you read the literature that is coming out, the heart plays a big role in titles of books and in the book content of books. The opening of the heart. Again, the important thing is, are we talking about something or is it something that is happening? I usually just talk about opening because I don't localize it. Haven't had that habit of thinking locally about where something opens. Either as openness or there's closedness or something in between. But there's something about this spot in the body. Is there? Not to make too much about it, because then become fixated and concentrated on something. Again, that should happen. My heart should open. My heart is closed. When it opens up, it speaks for itself. listening? Listening to ideas or to sounds? Thoughts arising? Seeing them arise, is it all transparent? Because there's no need to be anybody in all of this. The meditator, the seer, the looker, the listener, it's all just concepts. With great attachment. Attachment being physical as well as mental. I want this, I want to hold on to this. It's me. My existence, my capacity, my being. To expose all of that as it happens from moment to moment without the need to tackle it, to do something about it. In an amazing, inexplicable way, attention or awareness takes care of everything. Out of that arises the impulse to do something, or the quiescence, not needing to do anything. Now, which is always part of our first talk, in what has been talked about and shared this morning, is there any authority, or is authority projected into that? The sort of habit of taking over what somebody says as the truth because one believes in this person, has some respect or ideas about this person, their reputation, books they have written, what people say about them. And there's sort of an investment in believing what the person says and surreptitiously taking it over, including it in one's vocabulary, in one's belief system. That's not what this is all about. This is about exposing that and finding out for oneself what goes on in oneself. Words that somebody says, particularly if they are clear and come from nowhere, by that I mean are not said manipulatively, trying to create followers. Words can help in pointing something out and maybe clarifying, at first possibly intellectually. But the word itself is not what it is pointing at. The word cicada is not that hum. The word cool breeze is not what is here. In too much to put into words. So, can I convey this, that what is said, no matter how authoritative the sound, the voice may sound, which may hook into the listener's thing about authority, the way the voice sounds, the intensity of it, the strength of conviction, but it's not meant to do that kind of thing. It's meant to offer for exploration, for discovery. Each one discovering for themselves. And at the same time discovering how hungry we are for authority, both hungry for authority and hungry for fighting authority, doing battle with it, because the authority program hangs in our system since our childhood, earliest of childhood, with its mainly two aspects. One, the protectiveness of it. One doesn't have to think for oneself. One can follow and hope for the best. And the other is the oppression of it, the suppression of one's own unfoldment, and therefore fighting authority. But often not in the right place, because the authority hangs in our own system. You could say, I don't follow any authority, any outside authority, and then one follows the authority of all of one's belief system. Needs to fight, to protest. It's all there to be discovered. Moment by moment. This moment this, that moment that. The awareness is always the same. So if there isn't this conventional, traditional, maybe relatively easy to slip in relationship between us, among us, the authority and the followers, the teacher and the students, which is all image-ridden. Find out for yourself or question it with me, whether or not it is image-ridden. What is our relationship when there is no imagery of being anybody? I touched upon it last night in saying, walking through the hall, standing with people who are sitting quietly, there's no image of me or you, no need to be or represent something. Well, then how are we related? Does that result in confusion when we don't know who and what we are image-wise, traditionally, conventionally? That's it. When we don't even need to worry about how we're related. We're just relating in a free way, spontaneously, maybe even joyfully. At times we may be angry, but then there was all kinds of imagery coming up of how you should have treated me and didn't treat me. So, can we leave our relationship undefined and test it out, see what hampers it and see what frees it? I don't mean freeze it, but freeze it. Do you see the difference? Ideas about who I am and who you are freeze the relationship, meaning in ice. Where's the heart? In ice. But seeing the nuisance of all the ideas about me and you, and it's deeper than a nuisance, it's an incredible programming, wiring, coming upon it, seeing through it, seeing it become transparent. And simultaneously wondering why all of this caught upness in it. Is that necessary? And here the bird is chirping so immediately. You hear it? Do I have a relationship with this bird, or is it just saying treat, treat? Does all this, what has been said, seem so very difficult to do? Or is that more thought work? When it gets too complicated, too heavy, too difficult, the best advice is drop it all and start fresh. Simple. From scratch. One breath at a time. We will end here for today.